View from the Gutters, Episode 30. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Blacksad, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 5949. Alright, we ready to do this?
Yep, let's do it.
Alright, View from the Gutters, welcome to the show, episode 30. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Joe Preti.
I'm Matt McGinnis.
Eric Manix.
I'm Tobiah Panshin.
And I'm Cade Reynolds.
Holy shit, 6 people on the mics.
We got a full house tonight.
I think the last time that happened was like 13 or 15.
Something like that.
It's been a while since we had 6. Brant was on it. I think that was the last time we had 6.
Yeah.
So
I don't even think it could be 13 then, because he was on episodes like 9 through 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we miss him dearly.
The era
we
of Brant.
do, but he's doing adult shit and being responsible and whatever.
He's busy.
Whatever.
He doesn't love us.
I mean, I'm like, I got a kid, I just fucking tie her up and leave her in the closet.
Whoa, this says the guy who's always got to have his phone on in case his kid lights himself on fire.
I'm actually probably one of the most neurotic parents. I'm like, oh my god, she could like fall off the roof. How's she gonna get up there, Joe? I don't know. Maybe it's a trampoline.
Maybe she stole a ladder.
Somehow. She's like,
just give it another couple of years and you'll be like having to drag her out of her room.
I know, right? I'm actually looking forward to that.
That's going to be the golden years.
It will be. It really will be. I'm like, she'd be like, some dads are like, you're going on a date? Fuck that. Over my dead body. I'm going to be like, oh, that's fine.
Have
well,
fun.
Come home tomorrow. That's
Have
cool.
fun.
We'll be having fun without you.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to have she's not going to want to go out. She's going to be like, you're throwing a party tonight? Oh, I'm going to stay here. And I'm being like, no, you're not invited. So there.
She has to hate all of your friends.
What did we read this week?
We read Blacksad. We read Blacksad by Díaz, Canales, and Juanjo.
You say that into a microphone, baby.
Díaz, Canales, and Juanjo Guarnido, I think is what it is.
I believe these are two Spanish?
I believe
Yes,
they are
they-
Spanish.
Perhaps
I
Italian.
Thought that this was French initially.
Yeah, it was.
Looked at the artist too. Madrid? Was
Yeah,
it?
I mean, I could
So,
totally...
When I was looking it up, the two people were from Spain, and
Yeah.
then they started working for a French company.
Okay, so it's Spanish creators working for a French publication house.
That
Yes.
seems about right, yeah.
Well, it definitely has that European feel because it's taken
It really does.
10 years for the first 6 issues to come out. So
And
That's not unreasonable.
no, it's just it's done when it's done, and like the quality of the work is so high that it's like, well, they're gonna it's worth waiting for because the art is.
How many years did it take Planetary to finish?
It's true.
1
Well,
billion.
that's Warren Ellis, though. Let's.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't
Or
even
was it
Warren
War
Ellis' fault.
Cassidy?
It was John
Cassidy's
Cassidy's fault.
slow.
wasn't
You're
it?
right. You're right.
But
So-
worth the win.
So you recommended this, Chard.
I did.
Why did you do that?
Well, I can't remember when I initially read this. It was a long time ago, though. It was long enough ago that I recommended it to Matt 4 years ago.
4 years ago, yeah.
So I don't remember when I first read it, and I can't remember when the trade came out, but I remember reading it then and being really into it and enjoying it, and then rereading it again recently with my newfound love of crime fiction, because I don't think I loved crime fiction as much as I do now when I originally read it. And it just pushed like all of the right buttons for me this time around. It was just like, it's that great. He's a great character. I think he's an interesting character because he's so silent for so much of the book. But there's like things hidden in his eye. He's the windows to his soul. There's things hidden in his eyes that you with the subtle facial expressions that the cartoonist is able to pull off. Sometimes not so subtle, but a lot of the subtle facial expressions, I think the cartoonist is excellent at facial expressions and distinguishing emotion in the character. I really was just attached to it. I like his arc. I like his story. I think that the events that he witnesses and the things that take place to him, around him, are really interesting. I thought it was a good story. I love the art. The watercolory light feel of the art. I think really complements the sort of vintage feel they were going for. It's it's set in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. Maybe
I was a
all in the
little bit
50s.
confused about that part, and I was constantly looking for hints about this. And in the third story, they make reference to Howl, the
Right.
poem by Ginsberg.
Right.
It was written in 1956.
Right.
So that story presumably is after that,
Right.
but I don't know that the stories are necessarily happening in close chronology.
Exactly. Yeah, I get
Well,
that
and
feeling.
that third story also takes place during the witch hunt, the McCarthyism.
Right.
During the McCarthy
All
with-
three
when-
take place after after World War II.
Yeah,
So
so
no earlier than 1950, I don't think.
probably not. And
Um,
probably in like the early to mid 50s,
Yeah.
possibly leading into the later 50s.
With the last story probably being in the later 50s, early
Yeah.
60s. And I like a lot of interesting detective fiction that I like. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between each story that we don't get to see because obviously the detective is not on a case every day of the year or every year of his life. You know, this time goes by in between each story. If you read a long series of detective novels like the Spencer novels or something, like
Yeah.
a lot of time goes by from that first novel to the last novel. So I kind of like that there's like a possible aging of the character in between each story. But it definitely hits that vintage feel of the 50s for me. The art, I think it's really well done. I think the cartoonist feel that the artist has in approach to like these animals' faces, their emotions, like you can tell when they're angry and like when they're upset, I think is like really solid. I really enjoy the stories, you know. They're not whodunit mysteries, you know, really. There is some element of like, oh, he's solving the case, but like a lot of great crime fiction to me, it's more about the journey that the detective takes in uncovering who did it, because the story isn't about, it's not, crime fiction is a lot different than mystery stories to me, you know, because it's not about the solving of the case, it's about like how the detective goes about solving the case and how it changes him.
I actually talked about this with my brother, and the way that he described it is that you basically have two axes. You have detective fiction and you have mysteries.
Right.
And detective fiction, basically like in the 19th century leading forward, you were very, very heavy on the mystery axis and not so much on the detective. And then you had some kind of like really big name detective characters like Sherlock Holmes that started pushing things more towards the detective side.
Right.
And the mystery part became a lot more
Poirot and
stratified and formulaic to the point where it's kind of been eschewed entirely by this point. Like people don't really write mystery stories where you're expected to like follow along and be like figuring it out ahead of time. Like there's reveals that happen, and it's about the detective and kind of it's their story. It's not about the mystery so much.
Right. And the thing about the like European style detective stories like Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes or Poirot,
Christie's, the British tradition of mysteries.
That stuff is very much in my mind like figure it out whodunit stuff, because like you're playing along with Holmes and you're playing along with that, and like if you've been paying attention in the way that only Holmes can, like you will then solve that mystery at the same time. And so, like that's the idea, right? Right. All the hints are there, and when he explains it to you and walks you through, this happened and then this happened and this. I mean, you're supposed to have picked up on all this. Where the American detective tradition, guys like Dashiell Hammett and Chandler,
McDonald,
and Robert B. Parker writing the Spencer series, like it's more about going from place to place, and when the detective gets to the end of the story, the case is solved. It's less about him solving it as the case is unraveling around him as he follows the course of crime.
It's plot development as opposed to character development. When you read Sherlock Holmes, the plot is what's driving the story. It's where Sherlock Holmes is definitely a character, but you're following him along on this through Watson, who's allowing you to kind of experience it. When you read The Big Sleep, when you read Chandler or Hammett, when you read The Maltese Falcon, the mystery is just the vehicle for the character to develop for you. So your Sam Spade is what makes The Maltese Falcon as powerful as it is, and his relationships with people and the way he conducts himself. And that's kind of that Hammett actually hated the British tradition, like despised it, like wrote this great essay called like The Simple Art of Murder, basically saying you guys are all hacks, screw you guys. And he hated that whole Christie, Poirot, I've seen everything and you're the the one who did it. And there's this great, I mean, well, Christie and Conan Doyle and the people that came before them are definitely told great stories. I think the reason I've always gravitated towards the American books are because those characters are great. And it's very difficult to sympathize or relate to Sherlock Holmes. It's much easier to relate to a character like Philip Marlowe, who's just some schlub. He's not incredibly intelligent. Yeah. Basically, the only thing he has is like a snub-nosed revolver and this like sense of honor and stick-to-itness, tenacity. And that's it.
Yeah, we talk about this character archetype a lot, and I think that it really has carried into a lot of the books we've read. But we talked about in Desolation Jones. We've talked about it in Conan. We've talked about it in Fear Agent. That these characters are not necessarily the brightest characters ever, but they get by because they can survive situations that other people can't survive. So what makes them characters that are able to get to the end of the story is that they lived and everybody else is dead.
So
they kind of learn through that.
I have a question about this because this is very interesting, and I'm sure I'm hoping that there are some people who are trying to figure it out along with me here. What would you say Whiteout is? Would you say that's a crime fiction, or would you say it was a mystery?
Well, Rucka is all about the female Marlowe.
To me, it's crime fiction because I wrote a paper about this once, but crime fiction is a story in which the story couldn't take place without the crime initially happening. So without the crime, there is no story. So if you take the death of that character in Antarctica out of Whiteout, there is no story there. So to me, that definitely is crime fiction, and she is a detective, so I would call that detective fiction.
But what makes it a crime fiction instead of a mystery? Because I was reading it felt like a mystery.
Character driven. You're reading about her.
Yeah, a mystery is ultimately a puzzle to be solved.
Right. They don't give you any clues as to who the murderer is. If you read that and you stopped reading right before the reveal of who it was, you couldn't really figure out who it was. You could guess.
It's about primary and secondary. In a mystery, what has happened, the events are primary, and the characters are secondary.
The archetypal mystery story is there's a giant manor, there's been a murder occurred. It's this closed world. Yeah. That is all the evidence is there, all of the suspects are there, and the detective, by analyzing all of the clues and talking to all the suspects, they'll figure out who done it. They'll solve the mystery, and you as the attentive reader can solve the mystery along with them.
And sometimes those lines are really blurred. There isn't necessarily always a sharp divide, because I would say a book like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I consider crime fiction, detective fiction, even though he's a journalist and not a detective. It's fine. He's still investigating a murder or a disappearance. That book, there is enough information and hints there that you do solve it along with the characters. And sometimes that happens, but the story is still about the characters first. So I would say that a mystery novel is one where, and this isn't always the case, but a lot of times mystery writers will choose a new character every novel that they write. So say they wrote 20 novels, but they'll pick new characters in each novel, where a crime fiction writer will tend to stick with their same characters because it's about the development of that character over time.
And I think also in that vein, you could read reading Whiteout as an experience, but if you changed out the main character, it'd be a completely different experience because it's about her.
It would be, but she also does point out clues, and you do actually pick up on the clues that are provided throughout the book. And so during her big reveal, if you've been paying attention to the panels, you will have solved it along with her. So
if you think about it like this, what's center stage? If you take if you look at something like the first Conan Doyle story is A Study in Scarlet.
Yeah.
If you look at that, right, Sherlock Holmes is the vehicle through which the mystery gets solved, and he collects clues throughout that are there, right? And like you can definitely have that in a crime fiction story, but the way the story is experienced is through them kind of very methodically going through these steps. In crime fiction, it's much less about the methodology and much more about it's much more character driven. So I feel like Whiteout, while he does do a very good job of laying out the story and putting out the clues, there's definitely it's about her. It's about her experience there.
I also think
that makes more sense.
I also think to a certain extent it doesn't really matter what it is, because this is just a label that we're putting on.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a way of talking.
Yeah, you could call the Lords of the Rings science fiction. It doesn't change the story.
Right. I hate, and I always talk about this with music. Is just like I think the idea of a genre is the worst thing to ever happen to music.
Eventually you get into.
Because I shouldn't say Lord of the Rings. I should say you could call Star Wars a epic fantasy, because it is. It's an epic fantasy set in space.
Right. And I think that it's less about like what the definition of the thing, and like very often you'll go find detective fiction in the mystery section in a bookstore because they often don't have a crime fiction section. But I think what makes this detective fiction and what makes Whiteout detective fiction in my mind, and like as a reader, I think, is that it's about the detective first.
Yeah, and
and so I think this story is great because what happens in the crime is a lot less important than the character's journey through solving that crime.
So Matt, Eric, what do you guys think about this? You've been silent thus far.
Well, not to kind of play off things that have already been talked about, but I think what struck me most about the book was the art. I mean, the stories were great, don't get me wrong. I love the stories. But the idea that animals were used as people was really interesting to me. But more so than that, what was really striking is how natural it felt, which is kind of a no pun intended, I guess. But natural just because the artist was able to kind of meld these human-like and animal-like creatures, essentially, and it didn't feel striking in any way. Like it felt very easy to kind of go along with the book. There's other times where you can read stuff and the creatures, for lack of a better way to put it, can be jarring in a lot of ways or seem unnatural. Whereas, I'm like, it's a cat face on a human body, and I don't know, whatever, I don't know. I guess it's hard to kind of articulate what I'm thinking, but it just struck me. The other thing too is the facial expressions. Being able to take a cat or a dog or an eagle and make these facial expressions where you know exactly what these characters are feeling, or at least you feel like you do. I mean, I don't know, this artist must have spent hours looking at like shots of cats or dogs or whatever. I mean, I don't even know. But that's actually what I found myself wondering when I was reading this is how much effort he put into just drawing the faces and coming up with like the right things to show, because I mean you can't just look at someone that's frowning and then make a cat frown, you got to work at it. And I know that's a weird thing to kind of gravitate towards and really focus on, but that's just what struck me the most, is that even though these weren't humans, the emotion was conveyed through their faces so seamlessly and seems almost effortlessly.
And in an era where like we often get a lot of same face comic artists where they'll draw like the same face for everyone, and the facial expressions will be be so hard to distinguish from one another. Like
John
this
Byrne
is
did
such
not
a
draw this book. Yes.
yeah.
I was gonna say Jim Lee too.
I just have a very, very brief aside. I was really excited today because there was a preview released of a future issue of Mighty Avengers that's coming out, where the cover is drawn by Ron Wimberly, who I recommended a number of episodes ago for his book Prince of Cats, and I really love his style. But the actual comic itself is being drawn by Greg Land, which makes me want to not read the comic at all because that dude fucking draws the exact same face on every single character.
Can you call it drawing? I mean, it's basically.
Or actually,
Photoshop.
it's weird
Dylan
because like
does it too. Like,
he does one of
Land
two
is a
things.
hack.
He either like
I can't
on
think.
all the female characters he draws the exact same face. On the male characters, he draws a different face on every panel. Like I think the last thing I read by him was his run on Iron Man just recently.
Yeah, the
And
Canales.
literally Tony Stark's face changes on every single panel. It's fucking
different
nuts.
photos that he was tracing in Photoshop.
Obviously.
Sorry, it's hard to
I
stay
was reading the
consistent with
Hush
that.
last night, and I'm like,
know?
there's at one point where there's a reveal with Harvey Dent, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, Lex Luthor? Because like Lex
Yeah.
Luthor has 2 pages before, and I'm like, wait, what? Also, your head is enormous. How the fuck is your head that big? Your head is like twice the size of anybody else's in this comic book. Anyways.
Yeah, I think that this was such a breath of fresh air art-wise for me because it's just like
Oh,
great
it really
to
was.
see interesting character designs.
Well, I know when I read it, the first thing I thought was, okay, why did they go with animals? You know, that's the head frame I got in because I know, Andrew, when you were recommending it, one of the things you mentioned was one of the stories, and appears to be the second one in here,
Yeah.
dealing with racism and some tones like that, and also because the first story in this is fantastic. It's a much more personal tale of Blacksad, and I definitely enjoyed it. But I read just the first part, and to be honest, I wasn't completely blown away just on that one. I was like, okay, it's good. But then I got into the second story, and then suddenly it clicked for me, like instantly. I was like, oh, and this is the brilliance of using the animals because it's not too on the nose that way. It doesn't come across as preachy.
Exactly.
You know, you're able to kind of mine this territory of, you know, this racially charged time when it's a little ambiguous. Is it the late 50s, early 60s? I mean, it's kind of, but you've got civil rights stuff going on. You got communist, witch hunts going on. But it's using these animals and kind of even going with like, I'm a cat, so I'm kind of this type of archetype, and I'm a dog, and just using, it just totally brain farted there. Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to talk about stuff when you kind of disassociate it a little bit and like move it. And it's something we've talked about with sci-fi before a lot. It's like, it's easier to talk about our world if you kind of like make it a little bit fantastic and then can criticize like how political
This
systems
isn't
work
Earth,
or
this
whatever.
is
Yeah,
Planet
exactly.
Xenon.
Right.
I can't remember exactly the quote, but there's a section in my father's book, The World Beyond the Hill, about science fiction, which I've talked about on the show before. And I want to say he was quoting like A.E. Van Vogt, but it was probably somebody else. I'm misremembering. But his statement was that in a good science fiction story, you change exactly one thing and you keep everything else the same, because if you change too much, it just seems like incoherent fantasy.
Right.
But by changing that one thing, you basically put just enough of a twist on the mirror that you're holding up to the world to really see something interesting about ourselves, about the world that we live in.
I think that's what this book like nails right on the head with that story is like, look, you change one thing, they're not human. And you can talk about, it's so ridiculous that, these two animals would hate each other. It's stupid almost. It seems silly. And then you're like, oh wait, yeah, so is racism.
I think
Like that's just a stupid concept.
It's funny because we I think you talk this topic comes out a lot when you talk about Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is why I make that distinction, and it's because I think it allows you that there are certain things that you can get away with when you use these anthropomorphized animals that allow you to view things in a way that's, in Mouse, it's the horror of the Holocaust, which that story, if that story had been used, and he had used actual people, it would have been so awful to read that it almost would have been like parody. I mean, it would have been so difficult to get through it. It makes it you can get through it because they're animals, and you have this kind of safety between you and the story, and you can talk about these horrors without having to do it.
Well, it's not nearly as gruesome for some reason.
Absolutely.
It's still pretty fucking gruesome.
It's still
gruesome, but
how bad it would have
the
been.
thing is that that's the thing. He manages that he can make it gruesome, and it avoids a lot of the traps that kind of stuff falls into, where it's like, oh, you're trying to make this too real.
Right.
You can talk about it and you can analyze it and you can still get the punch of it in your gut, And
I mean, I read that comic when I was 10, and I still have nightmares.
Yeah,
about
no,
that.
it's. I mean, it's a difficult one to read. It was difficult for me to read in my 30s. Like, it's a difficult book, but him making that choice is the difference between being able to read it and it being what it is, which is probably one of the most like highly honored literary comics there is, and being a book that nobody knows about.
No one would finish. Yeah.
And I think making this choice in here allows them to explore. It's funny. This reminds me so much of there's this Denzel Washington was in this movie called Devil in a Blue Dress, which is based on a book by a guy Walter Mosley who writes a main character named Easy Rawlins, which it takes place in Los Angeles around the same time frame as this. And Blacksad reminds me very much of that character, and the second book reminds me very much of Walter Mosley's second book.
Yeah. And
I think I feel like it would be, had he not made that choice, it would have come off as very heavy-handed. And I really appreciated it. For me, the second and third issues in this were where this book fucking like took off and shined for me. The first one I was like, this is good, I see what they're doing. But especially in the third one, there's a few beats that I'm just like, oh man, that was just really well done.
Yeah. Cade, what'd you think?
Well, I'm kind of having this pondersome moment because, I mean, this thing that you guys are saying about how changing it to animals, well, it still maintains the, how hard it is, it spins some light on it. And I find myself pondersome because I actually did not feel that. For me, it's just as bad, even though they were animals, and I absolutely hated the second book of this. I liked the first one.
Thank you.
The third one had some good beats. The second one I absolutely could not stand. I felt that it was way too preachy, way too realistic, and just because they were animals did not lessen it to me at all.
Well, I mean, for me, it's really hard to be like, oh, this book is preachy, because the second book is like, hey, racism's terrible. I kind of agree with that 100%.
Well,
so
no, I do agree with
me,
that.
It's like,
just still hard to read because.
Why? I mean, like, what takes you out of the? I'm curious. Is like, what takes you out of the situation? Because along comes a detective.
So are you saying that it's hard to read because you're not invested in it, or you're hard to read because the subject matter is fucking terrible and it's...
Because of the subject matter. Okay. It's like, I do not want to read about the racism.
So you're, just to make the distinction, you're not saying that you didn't like the story or the way it was written. You're saying you didn't like the subject matter.
Actually, I'm saying that.
What, that you didn't like the story?
Yes.
Your wrongness is...
It wouldn't be a podcast if you didn't say it.
I don't want to cut you off, Cade. So was there another point that you wanted to make before I completely derail this podcast?
Well, I don't want to say that it's just the subject matter, because I felt that it did detract from the story, at least to me. I mean, this is an opinion. It's it's not that I'm saying that it is too hard to read as a fact. It's just that for me, it's not just the subject matter, though. It is the story beats. I love the way it was written. I just didn't want to read it. If that makes sense.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So go ahead.
So after we wrapped up the podcast last week, I made a comment to the other guys that I had a feeling that this was going to be a contentious podcast because I didn't think that I was going to like this.
Mm-hmm. And before reading it, which is something
just based on your pitch.
Doesn't set up like a negative.
I usually look at the cover of a book or hear about it, and I'm like, I probably won't.
But I went into it without wanting to judge it ahead of time, and it does have good merits. Like, I really love the art; it's very gorgeously done. There's a lot of really interesting push and pull in the characters. Like, these are obviously people who watched like lots of old Disney cartoons and really loved that style. Mm-hmm. But I really freaking hated the writing in a number of directions. And I'm gonna start with the second story because that's the one that I had the most problem with. And I feel like the whole animal fur colors as racism metaphor or allegory is just hugely incoherent in the story.
I don't think it worked.
The idea of like white furred animals versus black furred animals doesn't really track when there's all these animals of different colors and they have coats that aren't completely white or black. The leader of the racist organization is a white tiger who has black stripes, but nobody seems to care about that. No, not the polar bear, not the police chief. The tiger that he goes to see who's playing tennis with his brother, who's like a prominent businessman, who's like kind of in the background, like this leader of the group.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's got
Hitler
stripes.
Had blonde hair and.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's like
I mean,
they give Blacksad
there's-
shit because he's a black cat with a
no
white
mixed
muzzle.
race
Right.
I mean,
people
but they don't
or
give
no
the
Asian
tiger.
people or no Filipino people.
And like at the end of the comic, there's a fucking zebra child.
That's the point.
But
The zebra
it's
child was like
incoherent.
the idea of like, look, it doesn't matter. Our skin color doesn't matter because like there are animals with both, right? Like that was the end of that comic was like,
the
oh
whole-
look, all these kids are playing together. Like there's hope for the
The
future.
whole thing about mouse is that it's cats versus mice. Like there's
Right.
an allegory there.
Got it.
In this, it's all of
It
these
was too
different
hard for
random
you to
animal
handle. I got it.
That's bullshit. That's fucking bullshit.
No, I get it. I get that there's a little bit of inconsistency there, but it's like you're missing the forest for the trees on that.
I don't think that I am.
No,
You absolutely are, because like it's very obvious who is aligned with whom. Like it's very obvious that there's racism in it, that it doesn't make sense. Like much like real racism, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
it's kind of a ridiculous thing, and they're looking up to this white tiger who has black stripes because he's rich. Because he like helps fund their organization, because he agrees with their ideals. So maybe he's a little bit mixed race, but he believes in their ideology, which is that we don't like.
I mean,
It just completely fell down on me. Like the whole racism animal allegory thing didn't make any sense to me.
Well, and
I
that is
think
doesn't make
to
sense.
know,
I
and
also
it
have
doesn't
problems
make
with
sense.
the fact that they treat Blacksad like he's a black person,
Right.
but that doesn't seem to exist in any of the other stories. Like it seems like it's something that the writers just kind of pulled out of
Well,
their
you
hats
realize
for
that
this
he's
story.
in that second story. He's in a completely different place.
Yeah, he's in a very
He's not where
like,
he normally
racist
lives.
town.
Yeah, but that shouldn't really matter given the setting and the time
But
period.
you're putting that restriction on the story. Like it's not your story. You could tell the story any way you wanted to. Like that's.
Well,
it's
I feel
drawn
like they're being
attention to.
inconsistent.
And that's fine. Like I personally don't feel that they are. I feel like there are the animals aside from the tiger, which is clearly like to me represents like the inherent hypocrisy in fucking like Hitler was 6'4" and blonde and blue-eyed, right? No, he was short. He would have been the first person to fall under his own regime.
No, that's
I mean,
not
like,
true.
I feel like it's like all the animals they're dealing with are snow fucking pure white, and anybody that isn't like that, they're against. And I think that's made clear in the beginning of the thing. But that's, I mean, like, I feel that you're much more. I feel that you are very, very particular in what you look for in metaphor and allegory. And if it doesn't, I feel like this is another case. Is like, and you said this once, and I thought it was a great fucking thing because I'm like this with some things too. This is a case of you not liking it because it's ice cream and not potato chips.
I don't think that that's necessarily true.
I think the failing is not in the writing; it's in you in this story because.
I disagree. I also
They tell you a thing, and you said, I don't like that.
It's not that I don't like it,
a bad
it's like-
story. That's
they
you reading
told
it
me something,
poorly.
and I'm like, no, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
But they told it to you, so you have to fucking believe it. That's how a story goddamn works.
That's
if you
bullshit.
were like, okay, that is
bullshit.
not bullshit. If you go see Cars the movie, a thing that I fucking hate to no end, and I've never ranted about on this podcast because the mics are already exploding. They're already exploding in proximity to the anger in my voice. But those cars are goddamn alive. And the fact that they couldn't have built any of the shit that's in the goddamn world doesn't matter. You're still supposed to fucking enjoy the story and go, okay, yeah, it totally makes sense that there's a whole bunch of buildings with intricate carvings and shit when no one has goddamn hands. Like, you just have to overlook that and go, this is a world that exists.
Independent suspension.
It doesn't. No, like the Cars world makes zero sense, and I cannot watch it because it infuriates me. But I realize that is not a failure of Disney. Like, that is my own personal failing for getting caught up on the fact that this world could not exist.
Right, but it is not a central thesis of the Cars universe.
Yes, it is. They're all cars.
No, but that's the thing. Like, this is not a movie about architecture. Like, it's not central to the story. Yet the racism metaphor is central to the story.
But it's central to the story that all of these vehicles are alive. So when a car is inside of a plane. Take a minute to not kill yourself during that thought.
So the metaphor, the allegory is in the characters. The racism is a metaphor. They're dealing with racism. They fucking say it. They out and say it.
Yeah, but okay, if this had been like, if they had chosen as a central metaphor like carnivores versus herbivores, like that would have made perfect sense to me.
But I think that would have
been. What about an omnivore? The omnivores then, though, that doesn't make any sense.
Wouldn't have, well, like,
I get what you're saying.
I understand that it's not exactly the same thing.
I understand what you're saying, Toby, and I get it that it's not 100% accurate, but it's not the author's job to make it 100% accurate. It's loose metaphor. It's your job to fill in the gaps. It's like an old NES game. Like, the graphics are not perfect. Like, you have to imagine the gaps in the system. Like, when you play an old NES game, like, you're just looking at pixels, but you have to
But I don't feel like it's
gaps.
fair for the author to say, like, yes, this cube is this, like, wonderfully intricate thing that it looks nothing like, and you just have to imagine it. Like, the author has to do some work, and I feel like the author of this fell down. No, I don't think that they did a good enough job.
They told you a thing, and then they stuck to it.
But I think that's like...
But the thing that they told me I found fundamentally unbelievable.
All right, we need to move on from this point, because this is going to involve...
Can I make another point?
We are seconds away from your mama jokes. Yeah, I know it. I just know it.
Okay, so there's one other major point that I want to make, which is that I felt like there was inherent sexism throughout this entire comic book because the authors draw all of the male animals with animal heads, and they draw most of the female animals, not all of them, but most of them, with human lady heads with animal ears. Like, they make them way fucking more human, and that pissed me off.
Well, they are...
Because I felt like it was cheating.
Some of the women in the book look like very human. Like, extremely
Well, I think
human.
the first one does, but...
The actress in the first story, the
wife of the polar bear.
The wife of the polar bear and her sister.
Like, this face to me is not
like
human.
the two female characters that look like animals are the deer teacher in the second story and the giraffe art dealer in the third story.
I think the mother of the missing girl looks like a deer.
I think that she still has a more human face.
She's a cat, though, Joe.
No, she's not a cat. She's a bear.
Yeah, you can't even fucking tell.
Totally
no, and that's the thing is, like, I agree with Toby on this one. I think that.
Thank you.
It's inherently in the idea that, like, I think he drew a cat and was like, I can't tell that that's a woman, because Blacksad's face. Like, he doesn't have lips because he's a cat.
Yeah.
But, like, the female characters, he puts lips on them. And I think that's, like, honestly, I think that's the turning point. Because they have human eyes already. Yeah. And they have ears. And they have hair. So the minute you put lips on it, it's like, oh, okay, that's a person now.
And they have more human-looking noses as well.
But
I was talking about this with Joe a little bit before. And the thing is that, like, there's degrees of, like, furriness.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about, like, Usagi Yojimbo, and in Usagi Yojimbo all the characters are anthropomorphic animals, but none of them are sexy. Like, there's kind of a very baseline, like, this is how human they are and this is how animal-like they are, and that's consistent throughout every fucking issue of Usagi Yojimbo.
They do.
And then, like, way on the fucking other end of the spectrum, there's, like, basically furry porn.
Yeah.
Where they're, like, animal-like humans. And this kind of wavers back and forth between those two lines.
I do think that the female characters are a bit more sexualized than the male characters. However, when they're like a profile view, they're still very like animal.
Yeah, there isn't a degree of animalness to them.
Yeah, but they are definitely not as animal as like the pig bartender or like the lizard mechanic or something.
I definitely feel like part of that, and this is not like. Clearly, this is not a defense of sexism, right? Like, we could sit here back and forth and go, well, this is just the fucking industry, right? I think that a part of that is deliberate because it is this is the femme fatale we're talking about, right? And this is kind of like part of the trope of the novel. So yes, it is. Of course, it's sexist. The femme fatale trope is sexist.
And I don't want to label this as a sexist work because of this one relatively minor thing, but I feel like it speaks to the fundamental inconsistency of this book. From my perspective, like they want to have it both ways.
Right.
Like they want to have animal characters, but they want to also be able to draw sexy ladies.
Well,
and I feel like you should have to pick one of those things. Like if you're gonna make the ladies only sort of animal-like, you should have to make all of the characters that way.
Yeah, I agree and disagree because I think that one thing that he's able to do is take the female characters that Blacksad like isn't romantically engaged or some kind of like no characters romantically engaged in, like the dear teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that is I think that's where they go back to that. But any character that has to be like sexualized as part of the story, like the woman in the first story is sleeping with Blacksad, so like they are drawing her sexy so that you can be like, oh, Blacksad's into this very sexy actress, right? Like she's like and they had to somehow like fudge their rules a little bit.
I feel like I've seen enough like Disney cartoons and shit
mm-hmm.
where you can make a female character sexy without making her more human looking.
Well, I think some of the characters like really waver the line, even the male characters like waver the line between like human like and animal like, and I think it's in the face. I really do because their really bodies are human. Yeah. And sometimes you'll see them without shoes on and you'll be like, oh, those are paws. But mm-hmm. It's all about the face, and like there's that dog character from the third one. I'm
gonna be perfectly honest here. I was upset enough with this book that I skimmed the third chapter.
The third chapter has a Dalmatian in it.
Yes, okay, I remember him.
He looks pretty human. Like
actually no, he has like a perfect Dalmatian head.
Yeah, I think
like it's very expressive and it's very bendy.
Right.
But it is very Dalmatian like.
Yeah.
I find it incredibly ironic that you in your totally wrong fury, and your fury that is so wrong that nuns are dying right now in other countries, you missed the best story of the book.
You just re-killed
I skimmed
There's really, because I read this with an eye as to what you would think about it, and I had a feeling that the racism thing would bug you, but seriously, this story, it's like
and like I feel bad because I feel like I have an obligation to read everything that we discuss.
Right.
Because I think it would be bullshit to talk about something when I haven't read it. And so I didn't not finish it, but I did kind of just like flip through like, okay, scientist, he's Nazi, like lots of bullshit, and okay, he's dead.
Perfect summary of the
book. Yeah, perfect summary.
You didn't miss anything.
No,
okay, so
I can't imagine that there would be anything I'd miss in that.
Now the interesting thing here is that you guys that liked the second one said that the first one started off slow, whereas when I was reading the first one, I immediately loved it. I was all about this book. I was talking to my roommate about it. I was like, this is amazing. I read the second one, hated it, and then the third one, I had enough of that hate left over from the second one that while I admit there were some good story beats, my views on it were already so colored that I acknowledge that it had some good beats in it, but I didn't like it.
The first one is my favorite, actually. Like, it's the most simple, straightforward detective novel. It has the least amount of, like, room for error, I feel like, because it is so, like, they played it safe on the first one. Like, it is a very straightforward detective story that I feel like I've read before. It's just a fun ride to take with the art being the way that it is. So, like, I really enjoy the first one. The minute they start to tackle more difficult issues like racism and post-war Nazi depression and atomic bombs, like obviously they're going to lose readers because they're not simple black and white issues, pardon the pun, on the second issue.
I think you could make the argument that as Europeans, American historical social issues may not be as immediately polarizing as they are for an American audience.
Sure.
I also want to make this point. A majority of the males in this book are predatory animals, and a majority of the females are not.
Most of the sexy girls in this comic are cats.
Cat ladies.
Or at least half of them.
I count one cat.
Well, there's a cat in the first story,
is there a cat in the second one?
And the
No,
second.
there's a cat in the
Well,
third
Joe
one.
thinks the cat is a bear.
No, it's not.
No,
the other cat is not a bear.
The white woman in the second story is a polar bear.
The white woman is a polar bear?
Yeah, okay. In the third story, when the
What's
police
the-
chief shows up, he's a dog, and his wife is something else, like a deer or something like that. And their boy child is a dog, and their girl child is a deer.
Right.
Like, it's split along gender lines. And the mother of the girls is a deer, and their father is a polar bear, and one's a deer and the other's a polar bear. Like, they mention it at one point towards the end of the second story that she is also a polar bear.
Oh, right, because she's dating...
Because she's married to Kruick.
Right. Oh. Well...
But yeah, both of them are drawn sexy. And then the girl cat in the third story is the other, like, very humanized female character.
Well, I hesitate to say they're drawn with larger, fuller lips. Yeah.
I mean,
but
it is in the mouth.
Their tits and
that
ass are not hanging out. Like,
well, they
Okay,
are.
no, it's not sexist in that way.
Well,
I mean,
Like,
except that
I hesitate to use the word sexist,
Except
but
that
I
both
felt
times,
like it was a problem.
Both times Blacksad sleeps with a character, they are naked. So, like, there is...
Well, but he is too.
Well, sure, but, like, his tits aren't out.
That's true. I'm not
And
denying
I
this.
do have to say
there's
that
no wiener
I
in
hate
this
to
book.
tell you guys this, but
Dang it.
sexism is institutionalized. It's fucking everywhere, right?
No, I
Like,
totally agree with you. I'm
I
saying,
mean-
like, I think Toby's onto something on that, and that, like, the female
doesn't
characters
make it
I agree.
okay,
I definitely
Joe.
think he is.
They
I'm
are
not-
sexy.
I'm not
They're
saying
sexied
he's
up.
not.
They are much sexier than the male characters because the
Yes.
male characters are very clearly animals. And I'm not saying this as a straight man. They're like, oh, the women are
Well, it's
sexier
that-
than the,
it's-
but it's that
it's-
like one is very clearly a dog and one is kind of a woman
It's-
with cat ears and
It's
like
this
maybe a cat nose.
It's this very, it's this trope that is very endemic to comics, which is men look like men and women look like women, right? And it's very like
I guess, but in this one, men don't look like men. They look like cats and dogs.
they look like fucking animal
think-
heads on man bodies.
Well, and I think that's the issue. Is like the
Yes.
females don't look like that.
Well, yeah, no, that's what
I mean,
I'm saying.
and that's I
They
agree
look
with
like
Toby
cat
on that one,
ladies,
and that's fine.
which are human ladies with cat ears.
And there's definitely like
they look like Catwoman. It's like Catwoman throughout this whole thing.
It's definitely a blurred line of like furry and furry like porn in this sometimes.
Yeah.
Only
and
with the female
that
characters.
actually just disturbed me a little bit on a visceral level because
Yeah.
I'm not into that.
Yeah, me either.
No,
but
definitely not.
There is one other thing that I wanted to say though, and this is the part of the podcast where I pissed Joe off, I think.
yeah,
Which is
You
I
get
didn't really feel like he was a very good detective.
And
Like,
I say
it
that's-
seems like he gets to a certain point in the case and then he gets stuck and then somebody has to come along and either confess the crime to him or be like, hey, the plot's going on over here. Let's go check that out.
and I
And
think
my
personally,
response. Do you want it to feel this?
yeah,
Because I
I'll
feel we're
feel
gonna
this
have the
one.
same answer.
I think so too. Is that like what we were talking about earlier, the like Poirot, Sherlock
Right,
Holmes.
like I figured your response would be like, I don't understand crime fiction.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like these are two Spanish writers writing very heavily in the American tradition, where like American crime fiction is often not about the detective being extremely smart, but being strong and not dying until
Right,
the case
but, like,
is over,
it's this
right?
idea-
It seems like he should at least be able to like follow the case a little bit, and like I definitely feel like I got confused in the middle part because it seems like he gets beat up and he gets sent to jail, and then the chief of police is like, I want you to assassinate this guy, which seemed kind of weird. But then he's like, I don't know what to do, and then the snake guy shows up and gets shot and confesses everything to him. And if the snake guy had just not shown
Are you
up,
talking
like
about the first story?
He
Yeah.
already had
Okay.
an inkling at
Yeah,
that point.
well, that's the great thing about a lot of crime fiction stories in the American tradition is like, and guys like Robert B. Parker, who would come along after Marlowe and Chandler and would write like the next generation of American comics, often talk about this. And one of the things that Spencer he makes these jokes about like the Dick Tracy crime fighting school or crime fighting solving.
It's not about following from clue to clue. It's about pulling at threads and seeing who's going. Like a lot of times, what Spencer's doing is sitting in his office after he's just gone to see somebody he knows he shouldn't have, to see if
Who
they're going
comes
to
to
react
try to kill him.
All right.
So,
And I mean that's how, because he's not Sherlock Holmes, and it flies in the face of that.
So one of his things that he always says is like, when in doubt, follow somebody and see who you piss off, because if someone tries to kill you, you know, okay, I'm going in the right direction. Like I've solved something.
Read
And
those
so
fucking books
they're
again.
so good.
So
I read them
good.
again all the time. I love those.
And the strength of that school of writing, I think, too, is it just makes those characters that much more relatable. Because I'm not Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, like
Exactly.
I'll never fucking
I
be
think
Sherlock Holmes.
there's a beauty and a brilliance in watching him, especially the new BBC stuff, like the first season. I haven't really gotten into the second season, but it's like a marvel. Like there's a moment when in like Murder on the Orient Express where Poirot gets everybody together and he's like, I know who did it,
Right.
and it's like fun, but I remember reading like the Chandler novels especially, and thinking, man, this guy just needs somebody to like pat him on the back and be like, it's okay, Marlowe, you'll get him next time. Because he is like, a lot of it is just him like plotting through the other people's shit, and he's not the one good man in a bad town. He's like the one man that's going to tell you that you can count on him to do what he says he's going to do. And because of that, you get all this really great character development that you don't really get with Holmes. Yeah. You know?
And I think that the strength of the second story is that, like, once all these people are dead and that woman is going to get away with what she did, like, he is the one person that's still left alive to go, no, I know what you did. I'm here, I'm alive at the end of the crime to hold the people who did the fucked up shit accountable.
Yeah.
And that's the school of like crime fiction that this comes from, is like a lot of people die, a lot of shit happens, and like horrible things. These American detectives will often end up in the hospital after being shot, and they are still alive at the end, and that's why they remind me of Conan the Barbarian. Is like they just were tough and they lived through it, and that's why they're quote unquote smart. Is they're not clever.
Well, and the thing is they often know better as well, and so there's always this moment where they're like, I'm gonna go do this, and this is probably gonna get me my ass handed to me, or end up with a gun in my face.
Yeah, in the third story, he's basically like saying goodbye to his friends at some point, because he's like, I don't know how this is gonna end.
Yeah, and I mean,
so.
Well, you also get the feeling that he doesn't figure it out every time. Like he doesn't win every time. He's not superhuman by any means.
Right.
Like these are just the stories where there's a somewhat, I hesitate to say happy ending, but,
right.
But he comes out the victor essentially.
Yeah.
I have to kind of touch on that because it was actually something I was watching one of the older episodes of the show Castle. And one of the things that they mentioned is part of being a detective is just getting lucky and being in the right place at the right time.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're not, then those cases will generally go unsolved and you will strike out, exactly like Matt was saying.
And I think it depends largely on what you're looking for in a story. You know, some people gravitate much more for, like, I'm definitely much more about that. It's like I said, I love mysteries and I love fucking crime fiction and detective. Like, I'll read that shit all day. Like, I'll read Tony Hillerman books, and I don't know if anybody listening or...
I've never even heard of him.
I mean, people are still writing mysteries, and they're not that great. But, like, I feel that...
Dan Brown, there's a good example.
Oh, God. Can we just not talk about that at all?
Why?
I feel like it depends on what you're looking for. It's definitely like... I'm like this way. My biggest complaint about Harry Potter, which we were talking about previously, is that he's not heroic. And I like my heroes to be heroic. But I know plenty of people that are like, well, he's the everyman. You can totally blah, blah, blah. And it's
my
weird.
Biggest problem with Harry Potter is that he is a shitty fucking wizard, like
yes,
everyone in that universe.
Yeah. Well, he is. He is a shitty wizard. And
there's
like really,
one person in that entire series that's any good at magic.
You want to talk about fucking sexism, man. Yeah. If it wasn't Hermione is the one that fucking is the chosen one, let's be honest, right?
Without her, she did her homework.
She fucking gets everything done, and she gets no fucking thanks. And what does she get at the end? She doesn't even get the hero. She gets Ron. She gets Ron fucking Weasley.
Let's not talk about Harry Potter.
But I think that something that I really take away from the book.
I hadn't yelled yet, so I had to yell about something.
Good.
You just had to be louder than Chard.
Yeah. I know that nothing will ever be louder than
Chard was shaking. I thought he was going to spontaneously combust and take me with him.
I thought about cars for 4 seconds, and I almost like exploded the entire
I love
planet.
how you're willing to accept the fact that cars can talk and interact with each other, but fuck them because they can't build buildings, and there are buildings everywhere.
They don't have hands.
I'm totally fine. Look, I understand that foxes and mice and maces and whatever, like, they can't talk. Like, I get it. But I've been, like, introduced to this world of, like, look, these are cartoon animals,
Like,
and we're telling cartoon
we only
stories.
see a very small sliver of the Cars universe. Like, how do you know that there's not an underclass of robots that serve the intelligent cars?
Show me fucking one, and I will stop
No,
talking
they're called
about
the
that movie.
Transformers, Chard.
I'll stop talking about these movies forever.
Let's stop talking about them anyway.
Show me like the little kid who like lives above the world of cars, who is like building their little houses out of Legos for them. I'm done. I will totally accept it 100%. But because you give no explanation for why there's a fucking building there, I'm gonna have a goddamn aneurysm. Thanks, Disney. I can't stop thinking about it.
Every time I feel like every time I want to laud the works of Pixar, which I find to be good, except like they start getting into like sequels that don't need to be made, but whatever, they need to make money.
Made
That's fine.
Sequels.
But
Hey, Toy
I'm
Story
always
3
like,
was amazing.
I'm like, Pixar movies are great, and then I'm like, Cars, and I'm like,
It's the sad thing is it's not a bad movie.
Sometimes you gotta make a movie for a 4-year-old.
It's
I'm
not
trying-
a bad like people really like Cars. It sells
still
really
haven't seen it. Yes.
People like
I
it.
haven't
It's
seen it either.
It's not terrible. It just like makes me angry,
Well,
like at a fundamental
like,
level.
it's probably one of the most simplistic Pixar movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the preschool.
But does anybody else have anything to say about Blacksad?
No, I think that as with most things, pick it up and read it yourself. This might not be your, you know.
I mean, I'll be totally honest. Like, furries, detectives, like, not my bailiwick. I walked into it not expecting to like it. And the reason I didn't like it were for
so
reasons that I
weird.
wasn't predicting. But I may not be the best judge. Like, everybody else seemed to really like at least most of it. So
I will say that if you've read Darwin Cook's Parker stuff
Nice.
and
Yeah.
you enjoyed it, then you need to pick this up. You'll love it. If you're a fan of detective stories, if you're a fan of old movies, if you like Bogart in The Maltese Falcon or in Casablanca, you like any of that
Or
shit.
in The Big Sleep.
Or in The Big Sleep, pick it up. You'll like it.
I think it's a very great homage to this what is now becoming a well-respected section
Well, yeah,
of
for the first time.
of American literature.
Yeah.
Like early crime fiction in this era that they're writing in now is definitely underappreciated because it was written in this era where it was like these were the pulp throwaway paperbacks on a spiral rack, dollar books or whatever.
5 cents.
Yeah, 5
10
cents.
for a big name.
Yeah, like these books were not literature, they were never intended to be like written at this high level.
That's why they were called dime novels.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so
they are rich, and there's a lot going on there. There's a lot more going on there than is on the surface.
It's a wealth of it's a great American tradition, I think, the American crime novel. And I think that
absolutely.
for a Spanish writer and author to nail it so perfectly on the head that this feels like it could easily fit into that tradition, I think is worth reading. I think it's something that is something to be respected. I think the art's fantastic. I think the stories, there's enough there that we could talk about them forever. Like, all we've talked about so far is that some of us liked it and some of us disliked it, but there's so much subtlety there to be dug into.
I actually had a note about the art. The thing you could tell that these guys worked in animation because the actual layout of the book, just moving from panel to panel. There's some scenes where there's no dialogue at all, and there's moments that I was very moved by. The scene in particular in the second story with the blind bird as he's been shot, and he's sitting there with Blacksad holding his hand, and he's in the cockpit of the ship, and he's talking about casinos, and he's just dying, and you see his hand fall away, and Blacksad closes his eyes, and you flip to the next page, and it's like him. It looks like he's kind of smiling, and there's the flames all around. Like, that just broke my heart, man. It was so, but it was beautiful panel to panel.
This beautiful homage to that era in storytelling, both in movies and in literature and fiction. And that's what I was going to sign off on this book by saying, is that I don't necessarily think you may not enjoy the stories, but you cannot deny that these guys fucking knocked it out of the park as far as doing this homage to that era of storytelling. Yeah. Because I think they nail it. They nail the scenery, how it looks, how it feels, and I think they really these come right out of those books and right out of those movies, and I think I think they did a great job.
Yeah, I really can't argue with that. The art is amazing.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, even though I hated the second one, I mean, there were moments that really touched me, specifically the one that Manix was just talking about. I mean, so even though I didn't like it, and sometimes flat out hated it, there were definitely moments that did get to me that I appreciated.
So as with most things, go, if you haven't already read it, shame on you.
Yeah,
Go
why are
out
you
and pick
even
it up your
listening to
damn
this?
self and quit asking us what we think. Because you know now.
Yeah.
All right.
I
So
think-
recommendations.
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
I would like to recommend Cars, the graphic novel.
How'd they build the
And
fucking
then he
buildings?
burst into flames.
Well, that's how they explain it.
Andrew Chard, the Human Torch.
Just, oh man.
But like, why are there buildings at all? Why isn't everything just a garage? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're just-
yeah,
why,
why
is it just hangers?
Don't-
Like,
I'm-
why are
I'm-
there apartments?
Stop! I can't.
So apparently there
I
are no
can't-
recommendations this
I
week.
can't
Just
begin.
seething, boiling, roiling
I just-
fucking hatred over Disney's cars.
I just can't even there's nothing about that
Recommendation,
makes me
Pixar,
happy.
try harder. That's recommendation of the week.
Cade, why don't you do your recommendation?
Yeah, let's
Okay, so
get a real one.
yeah. So on a different note, my recommendation for this week is Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger
I swear to
Born.
God, you're gonna say Stephen King's Cars. I'm Pixar adaptation.
So this is written by Peter David with plotting and consultation by Robin Firth, who used to be Stephen King's assistant. I'm not sure if she still is. So script by Peter David, art by Jay Lee and Richard Isanova.
Isanove, right?
Isanove. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Colors.
and so these are basically prequel graphic novels to the Dark Tower series that Stephen King wrote, with oversight by Stephen King himself. And I haven't read them yet. I've been looking for a time to do it, but a couple weeks ago we did talk about the Dark Tower a little, and it brought me back into the mindset of just like what happened, and then I was like, oh, and I really want to read those comics, so I figure I should recommend them.
So, I'm a horrible person, and I've never read The Dark Tower, so give me the quick elevator pitch on just, like, who's the main character? Like, what's the deal with this?
What's the deal with the gunslinger?
Okay, well, the main character is the gunslinger. You actually don't know his name until the second book in the series, but his name's Roland Deschain. He's the last gunslinger in this world that has moved on from the world that it used to be. And he is following the man in black, and he doesn't really know why, but he's on a quest for the Dark Tower.
Okay. My sense of it from hearing people talk about it is it's kind of like he's a character from a Western, but it's kind of a fantasy series.
It's basically
It's-
Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table
In a
with
Western-
a Western motif.
Starring Clint
Okay.
Eastwood.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's got a lot of, like, there's
The
some,
Man in
like,
Black is a
Elric.
wizard. He
there's-
might be from The Stand and other stories as well. There's
Okay.
a lot of
And-
plot threads from
Cohesive
other.
universe
Yeah, there's a lot of
and
like The
Stephen
Stand
King.
gets referenced in the actual
Oh, a bunch, like,
novels,
this
and,
fucking book series crosses
Salem's
over
Lot
into, like,
comes
20
into
other
the
books.
novels.
I have
Yeah.
never read a Stephen King novel.
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
said, I'm a
there
terrible
is a
person.
lot
That
of-
actually
It's
is
not the
kind of
Easter eggs.
impressive.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
yeah.
not gonna lie, that's pretty. He's so prolific.
There is a lot of like dimension hopping and universe hopping, and like you never really know where they are except for the very subtle hints that he gives you throughout the writing.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say right now, don't read it. You'd hate it. You would fucking hate it. I'm never been so.
See,
sure
now
of
I
anything
want to
in my
read
life.
it just to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
To prove us
Maybe
wrong.
that was my whole fucking plan.
I love it. The best.
All right. Anything else to say about it?
I mean, no, not really. It's basically a Western science fiction fantasy drama. I mean, it's just a bunch of different things thrown together. I would really like to read and talk about the prequel comics because I haven't yet read them.
And this is
So-
some of this is contained in
Some
the
of this
novel.
is contained in the fourth
flashbacks,
novel,
yeah.
that, which is told in flashbacks. And I noticed that the first trade of the Dark Tower, Gunslinger Born, is kind of the story, but all put together in one place, and you're not getting bits and pieces
Yeah,
of it.
if you've read the novels, it is kind of cool to go back and read these graphic novels, if nothing else, just to kind of see it kind of put together in one neat package.
In chronological order.
Chronologically. And the art is really good. That was
Exactly.
Jay Lee with.
And there's no inks on this book. It's pencils, and then it's digital color directly over it, so it just really stands out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, not to take your thunder there.
No, that's okay. You said it better than I could.
Yeah, Richard Isanova is like a fantastic digital painter, colorist.
Yeah,
So.
and working with Jim Lee, who had a very...
Jay Lee.
Jay Lee, I'm sorry, Jay Lee, who had a very definite vision for what he wanted to do with the art. So it is stunning.
Good.
I mean,
Should I go next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I actually noticed something as I was going through and editing the website recently. If you look at our reading list, which you should totally check out, viewfromthegutters.com, everything that we've ever recommended. The one thing that has been recommended more than anything else on the show is Batman by like a country mile. Yet we have only ever once actually picked a Batman book, which is Batman Venom.
Is that really the only one?
Yeah,
we've ever
it's the
picked
only
up?
one that we've actually talked about.
Oh,
like
that's
people
great.
keep
We
pitching
did
these
have-
books and we keep voting
although
for
I
our
feel
stuff.
like that's going to change tonight.
Well, it could be. 'cause
We
we've
did
got
have a
few options.
Hellboy Batman book.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I
we
would not
do-
call that a Batman book, though.
No, that's a Hellboy story.
I would
That's
technically
that's
classify that
Hellboy
as a
with
Batman book.
Like, hey, I'm Batman. Bye. Oh, I'm back.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
Technically, I would
Batman.
classify it as a
Wait.
Batman book because Batman appears in it. But it's kind of like Hellboy Starman featuring Batman for 5 seconds.
3 panels, yeah.
But in any case, so the book that I brought this week, I had not read until this week. And I liked it enough that I really want to talk about
really?
it. Yeah,
I know,
really.
right?
Wow,
That is
that
surprising,
blows my
yeah.
mind.
The book is Gotham Central in the Line of Duty, which is the first 10 issues of Gotham Central. If you don't know anything about the series, it was written in 2002. The first arc is by Ed Brubaker. The second one is by Greg Rucka, and it's drawn by Michael Lark. And it's basically like NYPD Blue or Law and Order Gotham edition.
It's Law and Order Gotham.
That's,
Yeah.
that's how I pitch it.
It is it's a comic about the Gotham police force solving crimes and occasionally interacting with supervillains, and every once in a while Batman shows up and they
every once in a while.
are fucking pissed at
Batman
him.
doesn't show up at all in the first trade.
and
does
I
he?
love it.
Yeah, I think it's great.
absolutely love that.
No, he shows up.
Yeah,
a
he's
couple
in the
times.
first trade, but he's
Well,
not in the
he
first
is.
issue, with the exception of like his shadow or his cape or
He's
something.
certainly used sparingly, which
Yeah,
I
he's-
enjoyed.
Yeah,
They tried to keep him out as much as possible.
I like to think about this as a story about the unsung heroes of Gotham.
Yeah.
but like if
Shit
you're a
on.
fan of police procedurals,
Mhm.
it's really well written. I love the art. It's very reminiscent of what David Aja has been doing on Hawkeye.
Yeah, Michael Lark, right?
Yeah, Michael
Yeah.
Lark.
Who did all the flashback scenes in Captain America when Brubaker was writing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Not sure.
I think that's the case.
But,
I could
yeah,
be way
like-
wrong on that. Sorry.
Usually
I
with
know-
Butch Guice and
Who? Yeah, when.
Butch Guice and God,
But when they would
what's the other
flash
guy?
back in Captain America, it was always the same artist.
Steve Engel, not.
Anyway,
think
I've
it was
known
the
about
artist
it for a
couple.
long time. Never got around to reading it. I finally sat down. I really liked it. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think
Just to give a quick like taste of it. I mean, if I remember correctly, in like the first issue, basically 2 partners are following up leads on a missing person, and they kick down a door,
Oh,
and
yes.
Mr. Freeze is in there.
That's-
Freeze is one of them.
That's literally like the very
I mean,
beginning of the
that's-
first issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
that's right out of the gate.
they just randomly run into Mr. Freeze by accident, and he just totally murders one of them.
Yeah.
And they're like the entire rest of the first arc is them trying to catch Mr. Freeze before Batman gets him,
Right.
because
Yeah.
like they don't want him like picking up their messes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I love.
Like
this
I'm
book.
not the biggest police procedural fan, but I really like this.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of that is because Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka are such good writers.
Yeah, and they split this up in a really interesting way too, because they didn't
shift
switch
them.
issues.
Yeah.
They switched what shift they were writing. So
Really? Is that
I
how
think,
it works?
I think I might be wrong. Whatever Renee Montoya works, which I think is the night shift, right?
Is Rucka.
Rucka wrote all of that.
Yeah, 'cause-
So whenever it's Renee Montoya and the guy that becomes the Spectre,
Crispin.
I
Oh,
cannot remember.
it's yeah,
Crispin.
Alan
Crispin Glover.
Crispin
Oh,
Glover, the
Crispin
creepy guy.
Though his
Michael
dad
J.
in the
Fox
movie-
is dead from
Yeah.
Back to the Future.
Christopher
Yeah, so
Allen,
whenever
I
it's
think,
those
is
two
his name.
partners, the night shift, that's Rucka. And whenever it's the day shift, it's Brubaker writing. I believe that that's
I thought
the
it was by
lore.
arc, but I could be wrong.
I think that's the lore of how they split this up. So that
Anyway.
the characters are
definitely
always
cover a
handled
lot,
very consistently.
I'm definitely gonna read the rest of it, whether we pick it or not.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great story. I think that Batman can overshadow Gotham, which I think is a place that you can tell great. I don't know that you can necessarily tell stories about this about Metropolis, but this is a Gotham
did,
book.
though.
This is a great.
It would be a very
weird, like,
different book.
There was
Yeah.
a weird Metropolis Police Department book in the 90s, I'm pretty sure.
They're like, nope, we got nothing to do.
Like, I mean, Metropolis is the city of tomorrow, so you could totally write like a science fiction book
Future Cops.
of just like all the weird sci-fi stuff that happens in Metropolis.
Yeah.
It would
that's
be
true.
like top
That's
10,
true. That was great. Oh, I love fucking Top 10.
which I need
All
to
right.
recommend again sometime.
Manix?
Manix. Manix, go!
Manix brought,
What you got, Eric?
I brought the first volume of 13. For those who haven't read this, they made a video game several years
Is
ago.
Was
Based
it based
on this?
on the comic? book?
Yeah, the video game was based on the comic.
I did
Okay.
not know
Originally
that.
came out,
Like-
yeah, because the comic I remember it looking amazing and playing like shit, but the game looked visually very stunning. Had this really cool cell shaded thing going on.
Yeah,
But,
I have the game. It's great.
Yeah, but the art. This is, I believe, it's Belgian originally, and
I thought for some reason I thought it was manga, but
no,
this is definitely not manga.
This is another. I mean,
Are you sure?
No,
Toby's an
I mean,
expert.
I knew that it was based. The video game was based on a comic book, and I thought that the comic was a Japanese comic,
Right,
Ah.
right.
which evidently I'm wrong about because I'm flipping through Manix's copy.
No, this is very European. The art, I mean, this is a book that must take forever to come out. I mean, and the story, if you've seen the Bourne movies or read the novels, this is very close to the first Bourne. In fact, I had to like Google it, and it sounds like the first Bourne, I think, came out. The novel came out before this, so this
Yeah,
is
the
certainly.
novel was written in the 70s.
So yeah, this was the early. This was like 82 or something. So this is definitely after. So it's almost an homage or a love letter too. So if you're super in love with the Bourne stuff, it actually almost might be a turnoff because it's very, very similar. This story. I'm certainly no expert, but I saw the movies. But it delves off in its own thing.
And
The beginning is.
My memory is correct. It's about a guy who has 13 personalities who are all like experts at different things.
No,
and he's
that's-
like a
you're
secret agent.
thinking-
That's 13 is the number that he has on. It's
Okay.
similar to Bourne. He gets washed up on the beach in the beginning. No memory of who he is. Kindly couple kind of takes care of him.
Maybe I'm thinking of 7.
You're thinking of Killer 7.
Killer
yeah,
7,
is
that's
what
it.
you're
yeah,
thinking of.
yeah, that's
The amazing video game Killer 7, which you have not played, you
Oh.
should, because it's a fucking mind trip.
Yeah.
I
That game
have
is
played No More
insane.
Heroes, which is
Didn't-
amazing.
No,
Didn't that
okay,
come out for
every-
like the Wii or something?
No, Killer
No.
7's on the
PS2.
PlayStation 2, PS2 if I remember
Okay.
right. But if you've played everything that guy made after that, which is like No More Heroes and
Pseudo-51,
Lollipop Chainsaw and that guy Pseudo-51,
Pseudo 51.
Pseudo-
No More Heroes is great. No
It's
More
good.
Heroes 2 is alright.
it's
And he
okay.
does-
And to be honest with you, after playing Killer 7, every other game he's made is mediocre to shit. That's how good Killer 7 is. That game is fucking mind-blowing.
Do you have it?
I do not have it.
Damn it.
But it came out on both GameCube and PS2, so
Okay.
it is easy-ish to find.
Well, I have a PS2.
You'll have to fight through the beginning of that game to learn how to play it because it plays unlike any other game you've ever played. But if you can
I've
get
played Heavy
through it,
Rain.
no, I'm serious. Like there's not a turn to the left or right. There's a button that makes you go forward, and there's a button that turns you around, and there's a button that shoots, and then you aim with the thumbstick. So you literally just push the forward button, and your
So,
guy moves
like
on
the
a
entire
rail.
game is just like a straight line.
Yeah, well, but you get choices. There's like paths will show up,
Okay,
and you're like,
okay,
go
okay.
left or go right, and you'll like move your cursor over it and go.
Weird.
But to go backwards, you have to turn around, and since the game is like all about monsters, it scares the fucking shit out of you because you'll be like, da, 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 turn around, what the fuck? And there's like crazy eyeball monsters and like all kinds of weird shit, and the graphics like lend themselves to make it feel not scary, but somehow it's still terrifying and like, oh, it's such a fucking mind trip of a video game, and it's like. I don't know why I'm talking about video games on the show. I have a different show
That's a
for
different
that.
show. That's a different show.
But no, it's crazy good game and it's good. But that's Killer 7. This
Okay.
is 13.
Awesome.
13, basically, finds out that he's a government agent. He has a 13 tattoo on his body. So the whole story is him trying to figure out who he is, what he needs to do to move forward with the story. The story's pretty great, but admittedly not the most original. The art really is the killer on this. It's so pretty. So.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
Matt?
So in, I would say recent podcasts, but just about every podcast ever, we talk about how shitty DC is right now. All the horrible decisions
very shitty.
Yeah.
they have
Extra
made.
shitty poopy.
It's like they've absorbed so much cosmic shit that it makes all the other comics better by comparison.
As a reference,
I guess we could thank DC Comics for lifting
if
everything
I had
else
to
up.
invent a fake shitty comic book company, I
couldn't
couldn't
do-
invent a company half as shitty as DC
Yeah,
is
right?
right now. If I tried.
for
Dude,
reference, our syndication partner person?
Yeah.
The
Syndication partner.
Outhousers.
The Outhousers.
TheOuthousers.com has a counter of how many days since DC has fucked up, and this morning it was on 0.
Actually, they made a special post last week because they had to reset it multiple times the same day. And people were complaining because it couldn't go lower than 0.
I really feel like it
should go to hours
like,
now.
I feel like
I've actually been monitoring pretty closely, and it seems like it gets to 3 days because DC doesn't do anything on the weekend. So like it'll be reset on Friday, and then they'll get to Monday, and then they got to reset it again.
Yeah.
So let me also say, as much as we shit on DC, the reason that we're so frustrated is obviously because we love these characters so much, or at least
Absolutely.
I can't speak for everyone, but I can say that I love these characters so much, which is the only reason that I'm so dismayed.
Actually, I feel even more betrayed by them than somebody who's been a lifelong fan, because I didn't read DC when I was a kid, and I got into it in like 2007. And so like I was just like I was learning about the characters, like I was just getting into it. I'm like, this is awesome. Like I used to think DC was crappy, but they're actually really good. And then they rebooted everything, and it was fucking garbage. And I just feel like utterly
gelatinous body tackled you, held your eyes open, and rubbed fecal matter.
Like you ever meet like a really skittish cat, and you work and you work and you work to like get it to trust you just enough so that you can like pet it, and then like there's a loud noise and it flips out and you're like, it's never going to trust me again. Like, I am that cat.
Yeah, that's...
I thought you were going to say you finally get the cat out and you pet it and it's a friend, and then one day you wake up and it just jumps on your face and it won't stop fucking hissing and scratching your face and you can't get it off, and then like the blood's getting into your eyes and in your mouth and you're starting to gag and you can't see anything. That's what it's like being a DC
And the cat has
now.
AIDS.
And the cat has simple AIDS.
Well, now I know what you did with your weekend, Joe. Apparently you got attacked by a cat. That was very realistic.
That wasn't a cat, and I don't want to talk about it.
So Matt, what's your book?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
No.
there. But I wanted to pitch something that I feel like was a great right step that DC made, and something that has been retconned by current choices, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm pitching The Killing Joke by Alan Moore and Brian Boland.
A classic.
It is a classic, and if you have made it this far in your comic experience and you haven't read it, you need to read it, regardless of if we pick it tonight. The only reason I wanted to pitch it is because I felt like it's something that DC's done really right. And as we kind of said before, we've pitched a lot of Batman. We haven't picked a lot of Batman. And actually what I really love about this story is even though it has Batman in the title, it's really not about Batman.
It's really a Jim Gordon story.
Yeah. Like most of the good Batman stories, it's kind of about him on the periphery, like in the same way that Year One is really a Gordon story also.
Yeah. And this is like game changing. Like this has ramifications that up until a couple years ago, or a year,
up until the dark
technically
time,
it's still kind of sort of in continuity.
Yeah, technically,
maybe
it absolutely is in continuity because she remembers this happening.
Yeah. Okay.
Which makes me want to die inside.
All right. We won't delve into that.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking about that.
Yeah.
Just fucking read it.
Yeah, just read. Like Alan Moore wrote it with the intention that it would never fucking make it into continuity.
Yeah, this was
and is eternally surprised that it has.
Yeah.
So it really you should just read it as a thing in and of itself, without any connection to the wider DC universe.
This is Alan Moore in the heyday of him still being kind of relatively new on the comic scene, testing the waters with how far he can kind of push stuff, and this is the reason why people's minds were blown when he would be attached to a book. It's because he would do stuff like this that they never thought was possible in their universe. Because he even Watchmen, he originally wanted to write with DC comic characters.
Well, it was the Charlton characters.
Well, at first it was
characters,
DC, and they told him no, fuck off. And then they were like, well, he was like, okay, well, you just got a bunch of Charlton characters that nobody's using. Can I use those guys? And they were kind of like, maybe. So that's why they draw such a close resemblance to those, because he had already started writing using those characters.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
or as the legend goes, who knows how accurate that is. But I mean, he's always been trying to stretch the bounds of like what comic book superheroes are capable of and where to put them. As far back as whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Even.
I just have to make one little aside. A few months ago, my boss loaned me a trade that he has, which is just like the best Alan Moore. Like it's a bunch of random stories rather than self-contained stuff. And one of them is a Green Lantern story where Abin Sur goes to the planet Yismalt, where Atrocitus is from.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know anything about that. Like, I've only been kind of on the periphery of Green Lantern stuff. That story is fucking crazy. Like, that planet is like Cthulhu times hell plus a million. It's fucking weird as shit, and you should check it out.
Yeah, a lot of the Green Lantern stuff that John's really tapped into.
Blackest Night was from the seed that Moore planted in, I think it might have been that annual.
Well, yeah,
they only did a couple of things.
Could be, yeah.
When Abin Sur went to the Sector 666 or whatever, in one of the Alan Moore stories, like, most of that ended up in Blackest Night. Like, Alan Moore has this great way of just, like, planting these awesome seeds.
In 20 years, you'll use it.
That planet
like
is
a
just
talented writer
fucking
didn't get a hold of
I know.
weird
my
and
God.
disturbing and well worth checking out, because it's a story that, like, I'm sure any Green Lantern fan knows about. I didn't, and it really blew my mind even 30 years later.
Yeah, I think that if you can get a hold of that, Alan Moore's greatest hits and Alan Moore's DC's greatest hits too, like both of those are really cool at seeing like what Alan Moore can do.
Well, this is also, the Killing Joke in and of itself is important in the Batman mythos because it's up there with A Death in the Family as shaping who Batman would become later on.
It's also really a definitional Joker story.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's maybe one of the best Joker stories. I think it's not my favorite Joker, but Alan Moore, I think he really understands something dark about the Joker. And he understands what makes the Joker dark is this propensity for doing awful, hideous things with this clown-like visage.
Well, he also
it's
does
like
it
this
for the
huge
reaction
smile.
too.
Yeah,
like he does it as maybe we'll talk about this if we
this
book,
is getting to it.
Joker as a character often is like it's often like a clown. It's not about why he's doing it. He's doing it to see what you'll do as a reaction.
He's playing to an audience.
So he's playing to an audience, and his audience in this book is very clearly Gordon and
So I'm getting excited
Batman.
now, thinking about what we could.
No.
Well, because I'm thinking one of just an Easter egg in case we choose to do this one. One of the only good things going on in the New 52 is Snyder's Batman run, which has been fucking solid. There's a story in that called Death of the Family, which again I won't get into it in case we go here, but that basically is all about the Joker and what will he do to force you to react basically. And
I think if you make a list of your top 3 Joker books and this isn't in it, it's probably because you haven't read it yet. And if it isn't, I don't know if there's something wrong with you or not. But this is.
It's one of those comic books where if you are a comic book reader, if you feel like you're part of the comic book fan community on any level, eventually you have to read this comic.
It's required reading.
It's required reading.
The only other thing that I'll say about it before I kind of let it go and we move on is just one thing that I love about it that I think is misdone so much in comics is it is a very dark book. It is fucking like beyond dark, but not for shock value.
Yeah, no, it's genuine.
The darkness that is inherent within it has purpose.
It's the
Yeah.
point.
And
it's
and
not
really,
the
I mean,
whole
if
damn
yeah,
It's
we
never
It's
we-
not
gratuitous.
Mark Miller
Exactly.
dark,
Exactly.
blood, rape,
Fuck,
ass
yeah.
everywhere. It's
Yeah.
not that.
Yeah, this is like
There's
the
still
ultimate fuck Mark
restraint and
Millar's
subtlety.
style.
Yeah.
This is to the nth degree dark, but at the same time, when you're done, there's a purpose for every single thing, every single action that's taken in this book. And I just fucking respect and appreciate that can be done. And
Nice.
Alan Moore is one of the only writers that I know that can really, really do that.
Well, could do it. He
Yeah,
can't do that.
yeah,
he can't
yeah.
do that shit. He's
Yeah,
gone
fair
up.
enough.
The joke is always
Is
that
it
he's gone up
Cthulhu?
on his mountain of skulls and is now a 10th level necromancer.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
looks exactly like Spider Jerusalem. does.
I was gonna say the
Before he comes
beginning
out
of Transmit. That is Alan
That's
Moore.
Alan Moore,
That
yeah.
actually is Alan Moore. Like that's.
So what do you
I'm-
bring, Jeff?
I'm super jealous of Matt's hardcover recolored edition of that book
I
too.
need
Oh,
to
but
get
yeah,
it.
by the way, it's
Because I have
gorgeous.
your old one now, and I
Do
need
you?
to get that one.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's where that went.
I could have sworn that I bought this book and I went to look at it on my shelf one day and it was gone. And so I don't know if I'm like dreamt about buying it or actually bought it, but
Yeah.
fucking, you know.
The one that
Nightmares.
That's all right.
that I
That's
have
what-
that Joe now has apparently is was the like original one. The colors are all like really muddy and dark, and it's on newspaper print paper.
Yeah,
and
I
it's-
need to get this.
This new treatment of it is awesome, so it's good to see that.
Yeah.
DC can still put out a book that they wrote a long time ago in a nice format.
And it's
Yeah,
only
right.
$18 for the hardcover.
I was just
Mine
about
was-
to ask, and how much did that cost?
Yeah, it's amazing that a hardcover is under $20.
Yeah. When it
So-
was released, the one that I have is it's prestige size because that's how big it was. So I think it was $5
Yeah.
originally. So it's
Okay, well that would explain why then. I mean,
Sure.
it is I think what only like 3 issues or something.
yeah,
like
and
that.
then they
But amazing.
yeah,
So-
it's good. All right,
so,
Joe, what'd you bring?
read it.
I don't even want to talk about my book now.
Well,
Pass.
I'm going
you
to-
owe our audience a pick.
Okay, I'm Matt Fraction is a group favorite of ours, and I brought some of his stuff he did for Image. I brought Casanova, and it's him and Gabriel Ba, and
yeah.
the art is really hard to. It's very like pop art, crazy, which suits the story because the story is like sci-fi on acid.
If you've read Umbrella Academy, it's the same artist as that. However, in this book, it is not colored.
No,
Like,
it's
it's black and white with like green shadows.
green shadows.
Marvel did come out with a colored edition when they put it on the Icon imprint, but the original run is that kind of
The Image print.
monochrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Black
Image.
and
Yeah,
white.
Fractions
No,
creator own, so Icon has been reprinting
Right.
it.
But it's a trip. It's a lot of fun to read. But it's not necessarily the easiest thing to read. But I enjoy it, and I thought it's nice to see Matt Fraction doing something where he can kind of get away with anything he wants to because it's his. So I mean, I'm gonna be honest. It's been a while since I've read it, so I don't remember exactly what it is. But it's really weird and wacky and fun, and there's some dark shit going on there.
I'm
too.
not sure if people actually heard what the title was. Can you repeat that?
Casanova,
Okay, thank you.
and it's book 1, Luxuria.
Has book 2 ever come out?
Yeah, they've done. There's at least 3 or 4
saying,
volumes.
okay.
Yeah.
And
There was a
there's 3.
long time
Yeah.
between 1 and 2.
Yeah,
coming
it's
out,
a
so I
book that
lost-
flew under the radar. The initial book got a lot of buzz, and then it
Yeah.
kind of died down a bit. And
Yeah.
again, now it's not an Image anymore. It's under Icon, Marvel's creator-owned brand, and they went back and recolored at least the Luxury. I don't know if they've gotten farther than that, but there's at least 3
Alright.
collected editions.
Cool.
So yeah, it's fun, and it's Matt Fraction, so you know it's gonna be
Who we
solid.
love. And this is some of his early stuff, so it's cool to see like what he does now and the difference, but also like the similarity too, and like his writing style for sure.
And using curse words.
And using
clearly
curse words.
curses or make everything better.
Curses.
They definitely do.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I'm gonna talk about the other comic book company, Marvel. I've been trying to read a lot of newer stuff lately, and so I went ahead and grabbed. I read on Matt's recommendation. I read the Indestructible Hulk. I read the Superior Spider-Man, and I also recently have read what is this is Thor God of Thunder, and this book is
And it's
fucking ridiculous.
by Jason Aaron.
Jason Aaron
Aaron.
and art by Assad Ribic is, I think, the name on that. I can never say it. And I'm going to pick the first 11 issues and not just the first trade. So it would be the first 2 trades if the second trade was out. But issue 11 came out
this Wednesday
when we were recording.
Yeah.
And that is the completion of the first total story arc.
That is the first story, the God Butcher.
He has no beard.
Well, he does in the... so the story...
Sometimes
keep
he
reading.
does.
Keep
Yeah.
reading.
Okay. Oh, that's all I want to know.
So the story
There's beards.
essentially takes place over a lot of time, and in the first story, it's Thor's first meeting with this new character called the God Butcher, his kind of middle meeting with the God Butcher, and then essentially his last meeting with the God Butcher. So the original meeting is in 890 something BC.
It's when Thor's hanging out with like the Vikings.
Thor's living on Viking land. He's on Earth. He has not yet earned the hammer Mjolnir.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mjolnir.
He's not yet earned that, so he has just a giant fucking axe that he hits people with.
I own it.
And then...
Which has actually become really important in Uncanny Avengers.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Remender has actually picked up that axe, which has shown up a number of times, and it's become this like important plot device.
Oh, that's cool. I have
Which
not
is
gotten
actually
to
really
the
interesting.
X-Men stuff. So that axe shows up here for the first time.
Yeah.
And then it's his middle meeting when they call him Thor the Avenger because it's modern Marvel day. Present.
Current Thor.
So he's got Mjolnir and he's friends with Tony Stark and, he's doing Avengers stuff. And then it's the Thor of the end of time where he has a giant beard. He's missing an eye. He's got Destroyer as one of his arms. He's got the Destroyer arm. He's got a sword. He is the All-Father now, and everyone else is missing.
He's basically like the ultimate badass.
I'm just gonna say something. I'm not gonna give away any spoilers, but I just read the last issue because it came out, and there's, I think, a propensity in some of these stories to really build stuff up and then have a kind of an anticlimactic conclusion. The conclusion to this story is not anticlimactic in any way.
And I'm not going to lie, I haven't actually read the last 2 issues of this yet.
Oh my god.
So I'm picking this without completing it. And so far...
I was actually talking to Cade on... Wednesday. Yeah, yesterday. And I just turned to him and I'm like, so you know what's been really good? Thor, God of Thunder. I think when the trade comes out, I'll recommend it on the podcast.
He used those exact words.
I love this book. The art is awesome. It takes a little bit of a dip during the second trade, and especially I disliked the art on the issue, the origin
Number
of the
6,
god.
Butch Geiss's film
Yeah,
issue.
the origin of
it's really hard for one artist to put out an issue every single month with the level of quality that they're doing.
Yeah,
so
and
you
Marvel
have to have fill-in guys once in a while.
And Marvel's putting out some really solid books, and they're putting them out on time for as far as I can tell. So
a lot of Marvel now stuff is actually on an accelerated schedule.
Yeah.
A lot of it,
they're double
they only
shipping
started
stuff
at the very end of October of last year, and some of them are up to issue 15 already. It's insane.
Yeah,
so
all the X-Men.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can't say enough good things about this book. There's a great new villain. The God Hunter is essentially traveling through the cosmos and time to kill all gods because he hates the gods.
Honestly, if I had to recommend 3 Marvel books right now to somebody, the best 3, I would say Hawkeye, Daredevil, and Thor, God of Thunder.
And so now we've hit the trifecta as recommending all 3 on the show. So
excellent.
I love it. I think the art's fantastic. I'm excited to read the end, and I think everyone should read it. It's super good stuff coming out of Marvel right now. Everything shitty that we say about DC, the opposite is true of Marvel, and they're doing lots of really cool stuff. So
Marvel's looking good. They're like the X that got in shape and got all cut up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see them out in the time, like, damn it.
And I just
You're like,
yeah.
God, I remember when you were a skank.
Yeah.
Now, damn it.
I just wish that I wish the sales would reflect that. We were talking about this before the show, that DC and Marvel still sell the same amount.
It's weird.
DC is doing the same thing with 3 books that Marvel's doing with 6, which means to me that Marvel has more good. The 3 books that people are buying are pretty much Batman, JLA, and some other thing.
Superman.
And Superman.
Literally, if you look at the sales chart, it's Batman, JLA, and Superman are selling 150,000 copies each. And so DC has the same sales share number, but if you look at the top 20, Marvel's got 14 of those books.
Yeah.
And there's 1 image title.
Well, DC knows that too. That's one of the complaints that a lot of people have. I do myself is all DC is focusing on now is the Trinity of Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman. And I love those characters, but that's it. Like if you look at they're holding to, 52 issues when something gets canceled. What does it get replaced with? How many Batman books are there now? I love Snyder's Batman. There's definitely some good stuff going on, but do we need a Wonder Woman Superman book? Do we need that book?
We don't need a Wonder Woman.
I don't want that.
Personally, we don't need a Wonder Woman book, period, because I hate that character.
Wonder Woman is
I'll disagree with that, but I mean, we don't need.
I know that a lot of people would
Superman's
disagree with
girlfriend, Wonder Woman. We don't need that book. I don't want that.
I think my problem with Wonder Woman is not that she's my problem with this is that she's not really that great of a character, and that there are much better female characters at DC.
I need to recommend some Wonder Woman because there's some good.
Yeah,
I've read a lot of Wonder Woman, and I don't dislike her as a character.
Read all the bad stuff.
No, I don't dislike her as a character. Like, you misunderstand me. Like, Wonder Woman is a fine character. The problem I have is when people are like, Wonder Woman is the best female character we have. We put her in everything. She is in the Trinity. No. It's like, okay, you're like B C-list character at best. Like, there are so many other DC female characters I would rather read about. Why have we never got a Big Barda book? I fucking love Big Barda.
Big
Barda is legit.
Like, where's Zatanna?
The problem with Wonder Woman is that she doesn't have a strong core concept.
Yeah.
Like, is she an ambassador for peace? Is she a feminist icon? Like, is she a
disagree.
warrior woman?
I disagree as well. You guys haven't read the
is-
Perez run.
Yeah.
The George Perez run from 87 to 92. That stuff totally. He took the character, and she was literally this fish out of water. She came to man's world. It was the 80s at the time. She was an ambassador for the Amazonian people. Like there was a lot of play with the Greek gods. That's why I get sad with where a lot of these books are now, because that time was.
The problem is that after that great run, every other author that came in decided they wanted to reinterpret Wonder Woman, and now we have this like fractioned, unclear Wonder Woman icon, because at the same time. That Perez run happened at the same time as Superman Man of Steel, which solidified Superman's character in a way that Wonder Woman's character wasn't solidified.
They totally undid that, 7 years later?
So I know, when Byrne came on the book in the mid-90s, he undid a lot of this stuff and kind of did his own thing.
Yeah, that they had done before in the Silver Age, but then somebody, Then
Rocket came back on and had a fantastic run.
Did Man of Steel stand until Birthright, or did they redo it?
I believe so.
It was until Birthright. Even Birthright didn't retcon anything from Man of Steel, really. It just added more to
more of the Silver Age mythos back into the book. It added some of the Smallville elements with Lex, which were there kind of in the 60s.
Yeah, Man of Steel didn't really focus on him becoming Superman. It was
just how he functioned.
He's already Superman. This is his early adventures. So I think that it only added to that.
I feel like Wonder Woman's core concept is, I feel like of the Trinity, you have Superman, who stands for his motivation is peace. You have Batman, whose motivation is justice, and you have Wonder Woman, whose motivation is truth. And they're not doing what Azzarello is doing. I enjoy. I don't necessarily know how central to the concept it is. I know that he's probably doing what he can to write her the way he wants to. But when you look at that, there's a reason she has the lasso of truth, and it's not just because she was created by William Austin Morrison, who created the fucking lie detector machine or whatever, right? This has become her central thing, and you can see this when she's written well. She is who she is. She doesn't ever pretend to be anything else. This is why she doesn't have a secret identity
anymore.
Which they've tried to play with a bunch of times, with the last Alan Heinberg run, and I hated when I don't like the whole I'm Diana Prince, I'm a secret agent. You don't need that. None of that is needed at all.
And I get where you guys are coming from. There's a very strong place in your heart for what you consider the true Wonder Woman character, but the problem is, for a lot of us who have read Wonder Woman, she's a different person in every single book that I read.
Well, I think you can say that about Batman, too.
I feel that about Superman now.
I disagree about Batman. I never question what Batman is.
I think a lot of people want to come in and write Batman kicking people in the face and swinging through Gotham, and I think very few people write the story where Batman is in the Batcave.
He's the detective?
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is
read.
that there are different interpretations of Batman, but there's still an idea of what the core Batman character is about. You can say, this is an element of Batman, and this isn't an element of Batman. Batman isn't wacky. Right. With Wonder Woman, I think it's a lot more vague. Because I think that there is not a clear core character concept of who Wonder Woman is and what she does.
She kicks ass.
I also as a pure like gamer superhero nerd, if you're picking a team of 3, you don't pick someone with the same fucking power set as another character you have that's not as good as that character. Like, oh, what's Wonder Woman do? She punches things really hard and flies and
and
Superman's
she
got
also
that area
kinda falls
covered.
into
Well, no, you've got the Boy Scout, you've got the bad boy, and you've got the girl.
No, it's
You've
about
got
the
the
power.
Mervet.
It's the power set there.
Again, I'm going to disagree, but I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan. But see, the thing is, like people like Superman, I have a problem with Superman killing people. To me, that's not something that he should do. Batman doesn't kill people. With Batman, it's more like he's with his parents getting murdered. That's just the line he won't cross, even though, anytime the Joker gets out, he knows that blood's on his hand. Wonder Woman, do not have a problem with Wonder Woman killing people. Because she's the fucking Amazon warrior. Wonder Woman isn't a superhero. That's part of the problem. People trying to make Wonder Woman is not a superhero. No. That's part of the problem.
That's why she doesn't fit in the Trinity.
Well, I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
Batman is the idealist, Batman is the cynic, and Wonder Woman is the pragmatist.
Straight up.
Oh, Maxwell Lord has taken over Superman. He's going to keep doing it.
There's no other option. You're done. Yeah.
No, and I loved that story, and I get it, but again, she doesn't belong in the Trinity, and that's my argument, is there are these strong female characters that...
I think you're sexist.
No, fuck you.
They're these strong...
Fuck you. They're these strong female characters I would much rather read about. And Zatanna is one of them who doesn't get nearly enough
there's
love.
a ton of fucking.
And that's why you should read Thor: God of Thunder.
And that's why you should read Thor: God of Thunder, is because that's none of
because Wonder Woman is not in it.
Awesome.
So, Cade, what are you voting for?
Well, since I have voted for the other 2 of the triathlon of Marvel good comic books, I'm gonna vote for Thor.
Yeah,
I am also voting for Thor.
Woo! Starting off strong this week.
Ooh.
You still have time to turn it around.
I know there's 6 of us.
I love
this
Thor,
doesn't mean anything.
Thor, but I'm excited about a Batman conversation, so I wanna go with Killing Joke.
Uh-oh.
Well, I can't vote for my own book.
You cannot vote for your own book.
Fuck you guys.
I already know what's gonna win.
You can still vote for Batman.
I can still know what I'm voting for.
Well, if you
of course I can. Every vote for justice is a vote for Batman.
That's true. It's true.
But
you can vote for the other Batman book on the podcast.
That's what I'm gonna do.
All right.
Gotham Central.
I'm voting Gotham Central. Yeah.
I'm gonna vote for The Killing Joke, and since you can't pick your book, and to not pick Killing Joke would be a tie, you have to pick The Killing Joke.
That's cheating.
I'm actually gonna pick Gotham Central on the Line of Duty, which will create a 3-way tie, which ends the show.
Which
show's canceled.
Dun, dun, dun,
show's canceled.
Will the boys of the podcast ever find a tiebreaker? Will Chard spontaneously explode? Will Joe ever shut the fuck up? Tune in next week to find out.
We're just going to do a commentary on cars. We're just going to watch the Blu-ray.
If I can't win, no one does. World over.
World over.
No, I'll pick The Killing Joke then, because I can't pick my own book.
Ah, damn it.
This is
excellent. I know. I really wanted to talk about Thor. You should read Thor.
The Thor run is amazing. The Thor run is absolutely amazing.
Like, don't get
definitely
me wrong.
read Thor.
I want to read Thor.
I just desperately want to talk about how awesome this is.
I want to talk about Thor, and I would even be.
Well, then why didn't you vote for it?
Because I want to talk about that more.
Can we have
this gets into some very good ideas.
I'll tell you what. We'll talk about The Killing Joke on the next episode. Meanwhile, Joe, me, and Cade will record a secret bonus podcast where we just talk about how manly Thor is for an hour.
And I want to say something real quick.
You should just bring Thor next week.
I want to say something real quick.
Maybe I will.
You posted that article on the website, right, about editorial at DC.
Yes.
Yeah.
And about one of the big problems at DC right now is that they're enforcing this house style, which leaves very little wiggle room for anybody to do anything creative with the characters. The Killing Joke flaw is like fucking everything that is right about letting people do what they want to do with characters.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's why I
like this wouldn't fit into any house style, and that's you needed to shake it at the microphone. Apparently,
I picked up the book and I shook it at the microphone so you could all see it clearly.
Yeah, okay.
I have blessed the microphone with the Killing Joke.
Joe's lost his mind.
Like years ago, fucking years ago.
I just learned this right now. Well, yeah, I think that the Killing Joke happens only when you allow creators to take some liberties with your book, and making it an Elseworld story originally first was like obviously a safe play by DC, but it was so good that it was quickly folded into the continuity. And if DC was still doing Elseworld story, I would understand the idea of a house style. It's like, look, this is the things we put into continuity, and these are all the things that we tell with our characters that are not in the main continuity, because we don't want to confuse people. So they'll have a red cover instead of a blue. Like, if it was that, like the division of a world to make a continuity, I would kind of agree with it.
I think that comic companies should always do Elseworlds.
I do too. Marvel What Ifs and DC's Elseworlds are some of my favorite comics on the planet.
Well, I think What If was bad when it was a series because each issue was a self-contained story and they never had enough time to like pay enough attention to the story and really give it justice.
Yeah,
I wish it were an ongoing now where they would take like each trade was its own story. So they'd go, like 6 issues by fucking whoever, and it's like Hulk What If punches dinosaurs 1 of 5, and then you get to the end of Hulk punches dinosaurs What If 1 of 5 of 5. Me too. And then you get that as a trade, Marvel What If Hulk punches dinosaurs, and then next month there's a different one.
What if Stephen Strange was Deadpool?
What if Stephen Strange?
Oh my God!
What if
I am the Assassin Supreme?
Yes.
What if here's an even better. What if Wade Wilson was the Sorcerer Supreme?
Yeah.
That's the one I want to read.
They could do both.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That is
What if they
a
just
scary.
switched jobs?
That's
Yeah.
it.
What
That's
if?
it.
Seeing Wade Wilson with a sweet mustache.
All right.
Fucking
All right.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Tacos everywhere.
Straight
Tacos everywhere.
episode, read Batman: The Killing Joke because you should
Yeah, if you're
always
still
read
listening,
Yeah, if you're still listening to us.
If you didn't tune out after the whole fucking like
Cars
like,
monologue.
After I
months of,
started
like,
talking about cars and my eyes
other cars
exploded.
or our fucking
That was
like
pretty good.
digression about Wonder Woman or me screaming at you for
Or
pretty much minute 1.
what you're doing right now.
Yeah, or just talking for no reason.
You know what? They love me.
Nah.
I know they love me.
You have
But-
the most downvotes on our fan forums.
What the fuck are you saying? We don't have fan forums.
You're just not invited to
Joe.
them, Joe.
So read all the books
Yep.
that sound interesting to you.
Tell your
There
friends to
are
read them.
some
Tell your
really
friends to
amazing
read them.
ones here at the table today.
Read them to your infant siblings because they need to know how the world works, and comics are about that at the very heart.
Just read all the books like every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you to the
love
Auhauser
you.
for posting us. Look
Yes.
at our Facebook page. Push the little thumbs up thing. I don't know what that does, but push it.
Go to
Tell
the
people about us.
Outhouser.com.
Share
$1
us
every
with
time we do that.
with your friends because we
So-
need to infect them with this horror.
Yeah.
Because if you have to listen to us bullshitting, so does everyone else.
If you've
True.
listened
I'm
to
sorry.
if you've listened to 30 issues of or episodes of us, I'm sorry, but also thank you.
And go to outhousers.com and check it out. If you hate DC, that really is this wonderful place where you can go and just feel the warmth and love from other people that hate DC right now.
Or even if you love DC, go there so that you can see why other
No,
people
if
don't.
If you love DC right now, if
You're-
you're like New 52 is amazing, then you are not allowed to listen to this podcast ever again.
Why would you?
Wait, no,
Wait, hang on. If you-
no. We're educating people here, guys.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
If you're
It's true. So even if you do like it, go to this website so you can find out why other
you
people
shouldn't.
don't.
No, you can find out good books to read, and then your head will
Yes,
explode.
you
Yeah.
deserve better, is what we're trying to say.
yeah.
All right.
All right.
Over.
Podcast over.
Next week, same
Bye.
bat time, same bat channel.
All right. Bye everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.